All right, ladies and gentlemen, hour number 2 here, the Matt Allen Show, Independence Day broadcasting live from the Bristol State House. It was funny, we were just talking about this off the air. That used to be called, I used to always call this the Bristol Courthouse, because this was a courthouse for most of my life, as far as I can remember. But as we heard in the last hour, Dr. Pat Conley, this is a state house. This is where the General Assembly, in this very room, I believe, would get together and vote on laws and create laws right in this room as we are here. We're doing it inside this year. Usually we're in the center of the common because we like to be outside and it's nice, but it's not so nice outside today. So we are inside this room. The amount of bodies in here, we're putting the air conditioning to the test, but if you're real still, it does get cool, I promise. My guest this hour, we've how many years we've been doing this, guys? 5, 6 years, maybe?
5 or 6, yeah.
Yeah, this is you've been such a phenomenal addition to this broadcast every year. Alexandra Elliott is the executive director of the Quincy Historical Society. Ed Fitzgerald, Bristol native, former executive director, or executive director emeritus, we were just talking about that, Bristol native. Your dad was superintendent of schools, we just found out? Is that true? I didn't know that.
Yeah, long time ago. Way back.
Bristol native, and now he's he helps Alexandra out. Is that what we're saying now? Yeah.
Oh yeah.
You still work with the Historical Society, right?
Advisory kind of thing.
Not to mention a wealth of knowledge and history, and so we love you guys come.
I could not work without him.
I love it. All right, I love it. All right, so you guys just had a big event last night?
We did, yes. Yeah.
What were you celebrating?
Quincy was celebrating the Independence Day.
Mm-hmm.
So we had a big event out on the Hancock Adams Common. There were, we had Fife and Drum Corps. We had every single one of the historic sites were out on the common, kind of just having a little display out. It was very warm, but
I was gonna say, did anybody go down? Everybody
stayed.
All right, good.
No emergencies. Everything was, as far as we can tell, a smash success.
That's all you can ask for, right? Yeah. All right, so take us back. Did you? I'm sure you maybe knew or didn't know that this was formerly part of Massachusetts. The town common is kind of like, I guess, the thing to get to. What is it? Give us. I always ask this. I always want to think about this from the average person's perspective, the revolution in and of itself, because everybody thinks of themselves as the working stiff, right? And back then, the working stiff was probably 99% of the population, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Just I scratch my living from the dirt every day, and these concerns of the muckety mucks who are in business or in government, they'll the Game of Thrones will play out, and at the end of the day, I still have to make my crops grow and deliver my product to or milk the cows and keep everybody alive, right? Mm-hmm. What was the average person thinking about all this? Was it just that, like, oh, they'll figure it out, or was it a groundswell of opinion from the average person?
Yeah, there was definitely certainly in Massachusetts, there was definitely a lot of popular support for the revolution, because by that point in time, you have to put in context, this is after the Boston Tea Party, so you have the closure of the Boston port. So the Port Act, the entire economy of Massachusetts has been completely decimated. This is impacting everybody, because, people are, every merchant moving goods in and out of the Port of Boston. But then you also have the farmers who are obviously needing to sell things. But if the economy is not flowing, then that's, the system is starting to break down. Mm-hmm. So what you have is a population of people who are, really falling on hard times. There is smallpox ravaging through the countryside. There are dysentery in addition to, because Boston is actively under siege at this point, after the Battle of Bunker Hill. And Massachusetts is tired of it. They want the Congressional Congress to hurry up and declare independence, get the revolution going, and try and get the British out of Boston to try and get the colony back.
So if there was a referendum held there, you'd think it would have passed 75-25? That much? Is that how we're doing, or no? Not that much?
There, of course, would have been, and there still were quite a few loyalists in each of these communities that held things up. So Quincy at that point in time was still part of Braintree. Mm-hmm. And the North Precinct of Braintree, which became Quincy, was kind of the hotbed of loyalists in the community. And so you kind of see in the Braintree town meetings some records showing that they were slowing things down, maybe tampering down the language. Like, in particular, the Braintree's response to the Boston Tea Party was kind of a little bit more muted, possibly because the loyalists were, kind of commenting on it.
What's interesting to me, I just think about this, because you have those people who have official positions, right? The people who are loyalists. Do they have mechanisms of enforcement of their authority at that point? Or are you, like in the case we talk about the Gaspee all the time in Rhode Island, the burning of the Gaspee? because you mentioned the Tea Party. We're fond of saying Tea Party. Oh, we burned a ship, we burned a revenue ship down to the waterline, right, in Rhode Island, and we never get credit for it. But it was years before that, right? It was 72, I believe, the burning of the Gaspee. Was it 1772?
Yeah.
And 73 was the Tea Party. So I wonder if at that point what happens is you have the authorities. Like nobody ratted anybody out in Rhode Island. They never found out we don't know. I think we now have an idea who did it, but back then, nope, there was an investigation. The king demanded I want heads for this, and no heads rolled for that. What was the authority like? Did they have the ability to enforce their will at all? That's when the soldiers came into the British soldiers quartering amongst everybody starts to come in, right?
Yeah. Well, by the time the coercive acts are in, actual formal authority of the crown is limited to Boston. It's evaporated anyplace else in Massachusetts. There's work being done now by one of our researchers on a kind of more informal structure of loyalists and what kind of maybe informal power that they were able to exercise because of wealth, position, things like that.
Society.
Mm-hmm.
If we're back next year, we should hope we'll have that ready to kind of lay out for you a little bit better.
Is there because I'm thinking at that point, I wonder what the relationship is like between these people. Have to live with each other. They have to work with each other. Mm-hmm. And, it's quote unquote normal to be a loyalist. Like we're English. Right. What are you guys doing? And at the same time, those people you're turning your back on your neighbors. So were there, I guess, heads butting and flares and physical fights between people? And
absolutely.
There were.
Yeah. So in Quincy in particular, we have examples of some of the more moderate loyalists. So people who were not exactly the most wealthy. They were kind of just like an average Joe in terms of being working farmers. And they are declared inimical. So they are declared that we know that you have loyalist sympathies. And a mob shows up in front of their houses and they say, we have these warrants to arrest you. And they say, shall we burn them? And of course, that's an interesting provocative phrase to say when there's a mob in front of your house, and then they burn the warrants. So they're sending a message that here's what's going to happen if you step out of line, and we're watching.
Wow. And so at that point, that just ratchets up the tension.
Ratchets up the tension, because then you also have on the other side of that, quite a few of the very, very, very wealthy people in Quincy, who are the kind of people that you don't necessarily want to have in town, because they are the ones who are having all sorts of crooked deals. They are involved in they have a hand in every single pie of corruption when it comes to the Massachusetts government, and even going back over to England. So you have quite a range of what does it mean to be a loyalist.
So how do they? We tend to, I guess, bestow sainthood on some of the founders, right? Who amongst the Massachusetts group that we always think about was the one that was the most dodgy? Was on the other side. Hancock, the one who was, was there anybody of them in kind of both worlds? Like, we're going to see how this goes here. We're going to play both sides against the middle, or were they all in?
I mean, well, before the war, obviously that was one of the raps on Hancock, was that he was supporting the things while he was still, he was supporting non-importation while he was importing. Yeah. No, I think he was pretty straight once push came to shove.
Once you get to the signing of the Declaration of Independence,
they're all in. Your name's on it. Your name's on it. There's no coming off that.
Back.
But before that, there was a little bit of like trying to put your finger in the wind, see who's going to win this thing.
Yeah, John Hancock in particular is an interesting case, because the government and the sort of loyalist establishment in Boston was heavily courting him, because he is one of the wealthiest people in the 13 colonies. Mm-hmm. So of course, Governor Hutchinson is courting him. You've got all sorts of people who are whining and dining him, trying to, say, oh, come on, John, you can't declare independence. But at the same time, he's having meetings with the Sons of Liberty. So, he's not, playing one side against the other, but he's genuinely trying to figure out how he feels about it.
What happens to those relationships when they actually put their name on that paper and it's well known? I mean, what was the timeline? Once they declared independence, people over the summer, if I remember correctly, over months came and signed it, right? So there was no big signing with everybody was in the room. Right. How long until the folks that are from Massachusetts that are on there, everybody was well known by the public? Is it a year?
They were all fairly well known when they went down.
Yeah, I think everybody. Well, first of all, they knew who the delegates were.
Right.
So once the Declaration of Independence happens, they know these guys did it.
Yeah,
All right.
exactly.
So, okay. So once it gets announced, it's right there. So
Right.
everybody's got a marker in their head at that point.
Right.
They don't have to see the name on the paper. Everybody knows. So what's the relationship like with the loyalists then at that point and the people and the governmental authorities? Is it like,
It gets really interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
So,
of course,
go ahead.
well, there are no governmental authorities in Massachusetts by the time the Declaration is signed because the British have evacuated. So essentially,
they've been cleaned out?
it's America.
Got it. It's war now at that time.
It's an
Yeah.
American state. But yeah, I mean, you certainly had people that were still working. It's before it's before independence. But Benjamin Church, of course, who was famously in the inner circles, was passing information to the British during the occupation, and loyalists had to make the choice of leaving or staying.
Yeah.
A great number of the Quincy loyalists actually stayed. Most famous one that left was Samuel Quincy, who you can.
Yeah, Samuel Quincy was sort of the elder son of the Quincy family in Braintree. And it's really interesting, the political dynamics within that family, because Josiah Quincy Sr., who is the patriarch, and Josiah Quincy Jr. is like, he's referred to in the family history as the Patriot. He is like one of the guys who is very, very early on saying we need to declare independence. He's saying that at the Tea Party. And
Wow.
Yeah. That's pretty early.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, his older brother, Samuel, who's also a lawyer, but he's thrown his lot in with the loyalists. And so he ends up leaving Massachusetts, leaving his wife, his family, his children behind, and he never sees them again.
Mm-hmm.
Really?
Yeah.
That's unbelievable.
Yeah.
So remind people out there, the Quincy's are related to, obviously we know John Quincy Adams, obviously. But what's the lineage there? Is it through Abigail?
Yes. So Colonel John Quincy was Abigail Adams's grandfather.
Okay.
And John Quincy Adams is named after him.
Got
And
it.
right.
the city of Quincy is named after him as well.
Right. So the Quincy family line, it ends up connecting to John Adams, who then obviously goes and
Right.
becomes one of the great things about the John Adams story is that I always you see the movie, you read the books, is that he defended the British soldiers after the Boston Massacre. Right. They went there, and I'm shocked. I always think about today. When we take a break, when we come back, we'll talk about that. If somebody was an attorney that stood up for the enemy, would they be welcomed into the fold and then become one of the more pivotal names in the push for independency? Would even happen today? It's such a great turnaround for somebody, but we've talked about it before, and it's always I love hearing the story from you guys. When we come back, we'll do that live in the Bristol State House, right on the edge of the Bristol Town Common, 240 High Street. If you want to come by, right here in the Matt Allen Show, Independence Day broadcast in WPRO. That's right. Special thanks to our sponsor for this, because the United Way has been very supportive of all our 4th of July activities, quite frankly. So we thank them for that. My guests down here, they're live at the Bristol State House in the town of Bristol, on the edge of the Common. We're technically still in the Common, but we're on the edge of the Common at 240 High Street. Thanks to the State House Foundation, my friend Mike Riley, who did an amazing open to the show as the town crier. He's going to hydrate right now, waiting for tomorrow, which should be interesting. And he found the space for us because we were worried we were going to have to do this in the studio rather than here in Bristol as a result of the heat today. But so far, so good. We may have to move this here permanently because you don't have to worry about weather at all ever. But it's a great space. Alexandra Elliott is with us. She's the executive director of the Quincy Historical Society. Ed Fitzgerald used to be the executive director, now executive director emeritus,
Right.
And is still with the society. We've been talking about the founders from Massachusetts. We were talking I was mentioned before the break about how my favorite part of the Boston Massacre stories, how John Adams is this vociferous defender of independence, first representative to the court of St. James after the revolution's done. This is a guy, he actually defends the British soldiers after this setup job, would you call it, I guess, of the Boston Massacre. There's a little wonkiness there, a little weirdness, right?
There's definitely some wonkiness, yeah.
But I always wondered, like, how does his reputation survive that? But we've talked about this before. And what's interesting are the people we just talked about. Tell us the whole story about the co-counsel and who's involved in that whole case.
So before the break, we were talking about the Quincy family.
Yep.
And the two brothers that I mentioned, Samuel Quincy and Josiah Quincy Jr., are both involved in the Boston Massacre trials as well. So Josiah Quincy Jr., the Patriot, he is John Adams's co-counsel during the trials. So they are both co-representing the soldiers during the
Were they in
trial.
practice together?
Not
just happened to be
regularly.
that way?
They're just
Okay.
they were both chosen in this particular case. And then the prosecutor was Samuel Quincy, representing the crown. He was the one prosecuting the soldiers.
So how would that relationship be with how was the cousin? Is it they're all related at some way?
Samuel and Josiah are brothers.
They're brothers.
And
Okay, so you get brother versus brother,
Right.
and then some kind of cousin through marriage type of thing there. Right?
Yeah, and then there's family connections through
Oh
Abigail.
my God, that's
Right.
hysterical. So
And Samuel was the odd one out. He
Yes.
was everybody. I mean, his father wrote to Josiah Jr. saying, "How dare you defend these murderers of our patriots?" And there's a very eloquent letter that Josiah writes back about. They have not yet been convicted, and he lays out in
This
very
is my
beautiful
duty
terms.
as a lawyer. You
Yeah.
know.
which is today it happens even today, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
Attorneys all the time represent the most reprehensible people you can find, and because everybody deserves legal counsel.
Exactly.
So how did the reputations shake out after this? I mean, you got John Adams then becomes representative to the Continental Congress after the fact, after he defends British soldiers. Which let's talk about the Boston Massacre for a second. Is there a historical consensus as to who started what?
So the closest that we have to a historical consensus is that we don't know what happened.
So let's explain to everybody. Anybody who's never heard of the Boston Massacre, what happened?
So on March 5th, the evening of March 5th, 1770, so this is 5 years before Lexington conquered anything.
By the way,
that
if you
really
don't
kicks
know
off.
about this, shame on your history teacher. Go ahead.
But here's a quick lesson. So soldiers standing outside of Magoon's counting house are starting to get accosted by some young boys running through the streets. And over the course of the evening, the crowd grows. And essentially the Captain Preston, who's one of the soldiers, who's one of the commanding officers in the area, goes across the street into the barracks, gets a few more soldiers out to kind of face this crowd because it's starting to get a little bit contentious. The crowd's getting rowdy. This is 2 weeks after the murder of a 12-year-old boy in kind of another similar mob situation outside of a tax collector's house. And so Captain Preston has a line of 8 soldiers standing out front of the counting house and is just trying to maintain order. However, the crowd is getting rowdier. As it gets rowdier, the more people start coming in, and they start throwing objects at the soldiers. It could be in the trials, the people who were there say, "Oh, we were just throwing snowballs." But it's March in Boston, so it's a fairly brutal freeze-thaw cycle. You get ice, chunks of ice,
rocks,
dung, oyster shells, rocks, that kind of thing. So what they're throwing is a little bit more serious than that. And at some point in the evening, a gun goes off. Whether or not the order to fire was ever given is very contentious, complicated by the fact that at some point, someone went to the nearby church and started ringing the bell, which in Boston at that time is the universal signal for there is a fire. And so then you have even more people flooding into this square shouting, "Where's the fire?" And suddenly it becomes a lot more interesting. So at some point, one soldier either accidentally pulls the trigger or deliberately pulls the trigger, and then 7 others go off as well. When the smoke clears, 3 people are dead in the street, 2 more are mortally wounded and will die over the subsequent 2 weeks. And so that is the Boston Massacre trial. Every single one of the soldiers is identified in this, in the aftermath. They are taken into custody, and then legal counsel is needed to be found for them, and no one will represent them. Everybody turns it down. Finally, somebody goes and knocks on John Adams's door, and he goes in and is reticent to take it. He knows what's going to happen. That is not going to be good for his legal career. And then finally he goes and talks to Captain Preston, talks to the men, and eventually decides to take it. Josiah Quincy Jr., in his letter to his father, specifically says that he also consulted with members of the Sons of Liberty before accepting this post. So he got permission from Hancock, from Warren, from Samuel Adams, and several other people.
Do we know what their reasoning was to give them that? Do we need to have an air of legitimacy to this thing?
Yes. So this was showing that the Massachusetts colony could give a fair trial to the British soldiers who had killed members of their community.
So they saw this in the long run.
Yes.
This is going to show we're legitimate. So almost at that point, they won an acquittal.
Yeah.
Right? They
wanted a fair trial.
They just wanted a fair trial.
Yeah.
Did they get one?
I think they did.
Is the standard at that point still reasonable doubt? all that similar to today? Do you know? That's a little bit in the weeds,
I'm not a legal expert, so I'm not going to comment too much, but I know that at that point they're working with English law, and everything that we have today is based off of English law.
So it's most likely beyond a reasonable doubt.
It's going to be something along those lines.
Right.
Yes.
So there's physical evidence, eyewitness testimony, obviously the
There
most
are
important.
200 eyewitnesses called as part of this, and they all tell a slightly different story. Which
Is this like high theater for the community? Are they sitting around with people coming in watching this?
So it's was it open?
Oh yeah.
So they would so you would have had people coming in to actually view this. And things were a little bit rowdier during that period of time, so it probably would have been a little bit more
judge trial, right? Was this a judge or a jury in this trial? I can't remember.
It's a jury trial.
It's a jury trial. All right. So you have people, obviously peers from they're loyalists or not at that time. So, and then at the end of the day, they're acquitted.
They're acquitted. Yeah. So of the 8, so it also worth mentioning is that they're tried separately. So Captain Preston and then the 8 soldiers are tried separately.
Okay.
So Captain Preston's entire defense is that the soldiers fired without the order. And then the soldiers' defense was that they were acting in self-defense.
And so all of them were.
So all but 2 of the soldiers were acquitted. The other 2 who could be proven to have directly caused the death of another individual, they were convicted of manslaughter, but given essentially committed of the sentence, but they were branded on the thumb with the letter M. So if it ever happened again, they would automatically get the more significant.
Wow. That's incredible.
Sentence.
So what does that do to the surrounding area? What happens in Boston? What happens what happens to John Adams at that point once he does that?
Well, I think as Alexandra pointed out, they wanted representatives to validate the cause. And I think, it wouldn't quite say it's only Nixon could go to China, but you have 2 people of unimpeachable patriotic sentiments, and therefore they can do it and survive it. And I think we've talked about this before. I mean, there's some thought that they also, particularly John Adams, could kind of keep it under control because, there's all the question of, there's the famous man in the red coat story and everything else about it as to who may have actually sort of instigated things. And Adams is very careful that we don't go down that path and that he keeps it in.
Oh, I see. So there's a possibility that maybe somebody set it up. We keep it away from that.
The sort of famous rumor is that it was Samuel Adams who actually kind of was instigating the crowd that night and made it so that these things
popped off.
Yeah, popped off.
They're looking for a reason.
There is absolutely no real proof to that, but it was the most popular rumor at the time.
All right, well, hold it right there for a second because I don't want to know about Abigail because I always love hearing about what's Abigail thinking throughout this entire thing. She's probably steaming at home, giving all sorts of opinions and wishing she could be in the middle of it. We'll talk more about that when we come back with our guest from the Quincy Historical Society right here in the Matt Allen Show. Stay right there. All right, we're down here live at the Bristol State House. The Bristol State House, if you grew up here, it's probably known as the Bristol Courthouse, but it was a state house at one point, and we are here broadcasting live on the edge of the Common. Normally, I was just talking to my guests here about how this may be the permanent home if we're allowed to, because weather is not a concern in this room, and it's beautiful. And plus, if you're talking about, it's kind of the era, right? It's not necessarily colonial, but it's soon after, and kind of an old school meeting house room. It's a perfect, appropriate setting.
It has the correct aesthetic atmosphere.
Yes, there you go. Let's get the vibe, as the kids said, right? Let's get the vibe. All right, so we were talking about the Boston Massacre, the aftermath of that, and I love knowing what is Abigail doing during this? What is she thinking about? Abigail Adams, her husband is taking on a very unpopular thing, and is she always in patriot from the beginning? We got to get out. We got to get out of this British rule. We're in on it.
She is definitely in lockstep with John, if not a little bit ahead of him.
Really?
So she tends to be a little bit more idealistic, a little bit more radical than him when it comes to any of her ideas. She's willing to push the envelope a little bit more than he is.
Vehement abolitionist, right? She was
very much so. Yeah. I mean, so was John, but it was, you have letters of her describing interactions that she had with people getting into debates over the issue of slavery and over the issue of, equality of rights. So, that's absolutely something that she was ahead of her time on. Interestingly, we really don't know what her thoughts on the Boston Massacre trial were, because she and John were living together at the time, so they're not writing to each other. So she doesn't really say much in her letters to her sisters or to others about what she was thinking about that case, but undoubtedly she would have been supportive of him, just based on, how she talks about the rest of his career. She would have been supportive of him taking the case.
She is, how much does she influence her husband? Are they just feed off of each other, or does she? You said that she pushes him a little bit. Does she inform his opinion on the actual formation of the revolution, the Continental Congress, the aspects of things they had to contend with? Is she is she a cheerleader for certain aspects that maybe he wouldn't have been as I guess tied to?
Yeah, she's definitely someone who they are always having dialogue. The thing that John specifically says that he loves the most about Abigail is her mind. And so he's always wanting to talk to her and get her thoughts and to reflect and bounce ideas off of her. So I don't think it is possible to measure how much influence that she would have had on him. When he's president, some of his political opponents are derogatorily calling her Mrs. President, because of, how close of a relationship they had. But there's also instances that you see where she didn't have, where it's very interesting that she did not really sway his views very much. Like, for example, on the issue of women's rights, when she's writing Remember the Ladies to him, her most famous letter, he writes her back and basically kind of brushes her off and says, "Oh, you're being so saucy. I'm not going to take this I can't take this seriously."
I'm sure that went well.
It didn't. She writes, immediately turns around, writes a letter to one of her friends who's also a patriot, a female patriot, and says, I'm furious with him, and I think I'm going to get your help in writing a petition to Congress to take up this cause. And then she verbatim writes back, and here's what he told me, that I said that he told me that I'm just being too saucy. And then she waits 10 days before she writes him back.
Tortures him,
basically.
And this is when he's in first Continental Congress. Second. So he's all right. So she's punishing him without letters. And how many years were they apart? They were, for their first, I can't remember what the actual, it was like a great proportion, the first 15 years.
Cumulatively, it's something like 15 years. Yeah.
Where they didn't see each other.
Yeah. I mean, not from
all at once,
beginning to end, but over the large spaces of times when you add them all up. Yeah.
And she's at home, running the place, running the business, right? The business of the farm, of of managing the kids, managing their life, and he's away doing his stuff.
And I think she's also sort of his reality base, that she's the person who can tell him what's actually. We're talking about what the ordinary person is getting. I mean, she's reporting what's going on back in Braintree, future Quincy, telling him what's happened to who, what's happened to that, and I think she gives him a feel that he needs, because he can, I think, get a little carried away sometimes, and she keeps him grounded. That claim, which is often made, I think, is really quite true.
Well, what is it like in Philadelphia at that point? I mean, are they pretty much far away from the most of the action? Because most of the action is happening in Boston, right, or in Massachusetts, and so you can get pretty detached when you're living every day in Philadelphia, and you're worried about the flies and the heat, as opposed to the guns and the bullets and the people you're seeing, the bodies. And so to be reminded of that is probably fuel for him, right?
Yeah, John is in one of their exchanges during this year in 1776. She is feeding him information about what's going on with the British movement of troops. When they evacuate, she's kind of basically almost minute to minute, just kind of updating him over the course of, then it's taking time for him to get the messages. But she writes to him and says, "Oh, I'm sure you're getting better information where you are." And then he writes back, "No, I haven't heard anything about this. Please send me as much as you can."
So she's like an intelligence line. She's like a frontline intelligence gatherer. What is her philosophical influence? Does she have she's educated, I mean, to a certain extent, right?
So she is self-educated to a certain extent. Okay. She learned how to read at home. She never had any formal tutelage, but she was a minister's daughter. So that definitely informed quite a bit of her morality growing up. But then she also had unfettered access to her father's library. And so she was very, very well read for her time. And John specifically like would give her any book that she asked for. Almost, he would send it to her so that she could, continue her education. But philosophically, I personally am of the opinion that she had a great affinity for Thomas Paine.
You just recently did a talk on this.
I did, yes.
It's a research project of yours.
Yes, so that was back in May. I gave a talk called Abigail's Common Sense. So linking Thomas Paine's Common Sense pamphlet to Abigail's Remember the Ladies letter. So Common Sense was published in January of 1776. The Remember the Ladies letter she wrote in March. And between January and May, June, she writes, X number of letters, and almost every single one of them mentions some reference to common sense. And in the actual Remember the Ladies letter itself, she's going in the way that she's describing and crafting this argument of like, oh, well, we really have to do this because all of these things, and it's a truth, so evident that it is beyond dispute, and kind of like really appealing to John's common sense. About this. So I really think that she found a lot of inspiration from his work.
When she's looking at that, is she looking at the formation of the argument? It's like this is since common sense is so influential on the people at the time, I'm going to use this as my gateway drug. Almost like this is going to be the syringe I'm going to deliver the drugs with, right? Is that kind of what it is?
Pretty much, yeah. Because really, you cannot overstate how much impact common sense had on the direction of the colonies towards going for independence. And so Abigail was, hoping to use a little bit of that sort of rhetorical argument and that, elegant way of crafting an argument and appealing.
What was she asking? Do you want to say something real quick?
No, well, I think Paine opens it up. Paine, among the many amazing things he does, is people have hinted at it, but they've always been very careful. And he says at one point, we can start the world anew. And he really really makes the case that everybody's only hinted at, that this is truly revolutionary, that this could actually change not only us, but a lot of things. And I think that it's not so much that she never thought of it. I think it's just that she sees somebody has put it, and she said, how you're thinking about something and suddenly you see somebody else saying, right,
Right. Yeah, sure. Yeah. Many times it's happened.
Yeah.
I mean, some people say it better than you.
Yeah.
Happens to me in my show all the time. Callers will say something and go, that's what I meant. That's exactly what I meant. And so when somebody says it, plus it gives you permission sometimes, So if you've had these ideas in your head, like nobody's ready to hear this, especially when you talk about women's rights, right? Nobody's ready to hear this, but if you're saying we can make the world new, right, let's make it new.
And that's exactly what she's arguing in Remember the Ladies. She's not necessarily asking for, the voting rights for women at that point in time. She's asking for, protections under the law for things about, divorce and about, and she's talking about property, domestic violence, just, being able to inherit any of these sort of basic things just because women were completely at the whims of either their father or their husband, depending, and the whims of fate beyond that.
What was her reaction to that? What was obviously you just told us what her husband's reaction was, but was there anybody in any corners who looked at this and said, it's something we need to think about? Was just not ready for it.
Not yet. That I think it was. They were not ready to.
Just radical stuff.
Yes, at that point in time.
Can't we get past abolition? Get that and all this other stuff. I was like, yeah, no, that's not going to happen. All right, so then do we have to take another break, Andrew? We do, right? Because I want to get to Elbridge Gerry.
Yes.
We got to get to the governor. Well, former governor. Some governor at some point will be governor, but he is one of the signers of the Declaration, right. Elbridge Gerry, and the gerrymander. People have heard about gerrymandering. There's a lot of discussion about this, gerrymandering congressional districts. Well, the reason why that's called that is named after one of the signers of the Declaration. We'll talk about it when we come back. All right, we only have a couple minutes to the top of the hour here. Elbridge Gerry. It's not Jerry.
No.
Right. Because people say gerrymandering. It's not gerrymandering. Elbridge Gerry is one of the signers of the Declaration.
Correct.
Governor of Massachusetts eventually.
Correct.
And what happens? Why is gerrymandering named after him?
Because he was governor of Massachusetts in 1812. He was a Democratic Republican in a predominantly federalist state. They had the legislature. There was the redistricting due to the 1810 census for the state lines.
Sound familiar?
Exactly. And they drew one outline up through Essex County that looked remarkably like a salamander.
And so now, hence the gerrymander.
The Federalists grabbed it and ran with it, basically.
And it was in a paper, right? It was made a cartoon,
yes.
which made him famous.
Right.
And so, of all the things he's done in his life, he's known for the gerrymander more than anything else,
Signed
right?
the Declaration of Independence, Constitutional Convention, XYZ affair.
Yeah.
Nothing,
Zilch.
just the gerrymander.
Just the gerrymander. So if anybody, it's actually gerrymander. So if you can, a little fun fact you can bring out to people at the 4th of July picnic, if you're out there this weekend, that the gerrymander is literally as old as the country, right?
Yes.
I mean, even to get out the vote, like people talk about, people getting involved with grabbing your votes and everything. I mean, Alexander Hamilton was known to go pick people up in a wagon and bring them to the polls, right? I mean, this is everything that we have today has existed for as long as possible. And like, I was one of my favorite things. If you ever get a chance to go on YouTube, it was done, I want to say 2008. Reason Magazine took some of the pamphlets and some of the things said by the Thomas Jefferson campaign and the Adams campaign about what they said about each other in the newspapers and turned it into a negative campaign ad. And the things that they said were unbelievable. And it's hysterical to look at.
One of the dirtiest election campaigns in American history, actually.
Oh, it was the things that they say kind of, well, it's similar now, but it's pretty brutal.
Right.
Women their heads will be writhing on a pike, chastity be violated in the streets are going to run with blood, watch out, forget it. Jefferson called Adams hermaphroditical. He said he doesn't have the firmness of a man or the sensibilities of a woman. He's a hermaphrodite.
There's a lot of that. The number of jokes that are going on in a lot of these high-level constitutional debates,
really,
from the time are
right.
amazing.
We're going to hold you over because we got to talk. We'll talk a little bit about this when we come back. We got the top of the hour. We do news, and then we're going to eventually get our friends from the committee are at a luncheon that they've been waylaid. So I'll grab some more time for my friends from the Quincy Historical Society next. Well, I'll tell you what, we had a huge crowd in here before. It's kind of lightened up a little bit, thank goodness for the heat. But you guys make up for it with vigor and verve. I like this. You guys are hardcore. We're here broadcasting live from the Bristol State House. What's that? It used to be a courthouse. Before that, it was a state house. Literally, the General Assembly would move around the state. Dr. Conley in the first hour, he said, was it in political circles, like literally in circles around the state? And we were, really blessed that Mike Riley, who's the town crier here, is also a member of the State House Foundation, suggested we use this room, which is air conditioned, as opposed to dying out in the middle of the commons. So we thank them for this. We thank all the folks. Thanks the Community String Project, who actually uses this room they're off for their season right now, but they agreed to let us use this room as well. So check that out, the Community String Project. It's communitystringproject.org. If you like to support musicians and local musicians, it's a beautiful space. It looks like an old-timey meeting house. Literally, that's what it was. And so we're up on the dais, like we're in the judge in the courtroom. It's very cool. I put pictures up on the Facebook page if you want to go ahead and check it out. Just go to facebook.com/The Matt Allen Show. And usually this hour we dedicate to our friends from the Bristol 4th of July Committee, but they're all in a military luncheon right now, wrapping up in Warren, of all places, which should be illegal. Shouldn't be in Warren on the day. You're supposed to be ready to be down here. But anyway, Anna told me, Little Miss 4th of July, I'll be down here in a little while. And so my friends from the Quincy Historical Society, you guys are going to stick around for a few more minutes because we barely get to talk about the Elbridge Gerry stuff. But I can talk about John and Abigail forever, and so can you. That's why I love it. It's funny. What is the letters back and forth? How many letters do we have back and forth between John and Abigail Adams? Has there ever been a number?
There is
thousands.
It is.
Oh, yeah.
It's over. I think it's around 1,300. It's over 1,000.
And they've been published.
Most of them have
Most
been.
of them
They, the Massachusetts Historical Society, some of our fantastic colleagues up in Massachusetts, they have the most complete collection of the letters, and they have digitized quite a huge number of them, so you can actually go on the website and kind of actually see the handwriting and
where they chronological order
and follow them in chronological order. They also have transcribed copies, and they publish a number of collections of them as well. So they do fantastic work preserving those letters, and I think they're now really working on the John Quincy Adams diaries as well.
Really?
So shout out to them.
If you've never been, the John Adams house tour is phenomenal.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It is worth it was $10 when we did it, right, sweetheart? My wife's was it $5? Was it $5? Is that low? Oh wow, it was not much. I think it's 15 now,
I think it's
right?
15 now.
Yeah, inflation happens, but it was, I mean, even 15, my God. And you go in, at first I was a little disappointed because you go to the birth house.
You do.
It's like in the middle of a neighborhood and you're sitting there and you go into these little two salt box houses and like, this is it? And they're kind of empty. There's not much in them. But then you get to go to Peacefield.
Yes.
Which is the mansion that was built. Now, remind me, Peacefield was built while they were in England?
So Peacefield actually predates John and Abigail living there. It was built in, I am going to blank on the year.
I think 1730.
I believe so. Yeah, so 1730. We have one of our experts in the audience.
Our loyalist expert is in the audience.
So Peacefield is built in 1730 by the Vassal family. So the Vassals are loyalists. They are very involved in the sugar trade and between England, Barbados, and Massachusetts. And they bring this incredible mahogany sitting room that you can still go and see. And when John and Abigail get back from, or are about to come back from England, they're thinking, okay, well, we're going to need a new house to receive all of these visitors because he's been
And the Vassals were.
Oh, and go ahead.
Loyalists.
Yes.
Yep. Yep.
Did you mention it?
Yes.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
So the Vassals are loyalists.
Vassals are loyalists. So they end up leaving town.
So this house is empty.
House is empty. It has
Who
been.
owns it? They still own it at that time,
They
even though
they still own it, but it goes. Kind of passes through a few different hands. I think they have soldiers quartered in there for a while. So Abigail, when she sees it afterward, she describes it as being like messy as a wren's nest.
Oh yeah, it was because dilapidated, right?
Because
there was a
little bit
lot
dilapidated.
of stuff that needed to be done to it. Because at that point, their station had been improved. Muchly, they were, obviously the ambassadors now, right?
Exactly.
So in order to receive people and to be able to do this, you have to have a place.
Find a house.
That's right. So there was a lot of renovations and additions over the years to that house.
There have been.
You get to go into this place. You can see, if you've ever watched the John Adams miniseries HBO did, highly recommend it. On a rainy 4th of July, it's a great thing to do. And you can see where their daughter Nabby passes away. She dies of breast cancer, if I remember correctly. Yes. And you can see the room, the bed that she laid in this. You can see it. And what's cool about it is that the Adams family, I guess, still gets privileges to this property. So they have an Adams family reunion every couple of years, or every year? Is it every year?
They do. I know they do a big one every couple of years. We actually just attended.
Did you?
Yeah, 2 weekends ago. 1 weekend ago. And so that was kind of the Adamses who they celebrate the gift of the house to the National Park Service. And so this was the 80th year this year.
And it was told to us at the time, these rangers, the park rangers, but they're historians, that you would not be uncommon to find members of the family sitting in the furniture that's off limits to the public. They can go in there, they can walk around, and they can...
It didn't happen while we were there, but apparently that used to happen.
Evidently that can happen, right? And one of the cool things that I saw that always sticks with me is that there was a piece of this, I think, Swarovski crystal that Abigail had brought back from England, I believe, and there was stitching in it. It looked like it had been held together by metal bands. And I asked what happened, and the guy said that John Quincy, he was I guess some sort of, he was trying to study plant life, had taken his mother's crystal bowl, planted a tree of some kind in it to watch the root structure through the bowl.
Yes,
and it broke.
Yep.
They found it buried in a barn that they had excavated, I guess, originally, and he hid it from his parents. So they took it and they stitched it back together and put it in a shelf.
Precisely. Yep.
So,
it is still on display.
It's still there. Yeah. So literally, just what every other kid. So you have the John Quincy, the president of the United States, who hid from his mother that he broke her glass bowl because he wanted to stay. I mean, most of the time it's kids being careless, but he wanted to study plant life, right? So that's the kind of thing you'll see there. It's amazing. And it's the first presidential library, if I remember correctly, as well.
The Stone Library, yes. Yeah. So that John Adams's books are not in there anymore. It's mostly John Quincy's and Charles Francis's. John Adams's books are currently at the Boston Public Library.
Okay, so but you can see, and it was made of stone.
Yep.
Because he had a fire.
Fire, yes.
And he was a humongous library. He's a huge collector of books.
Yes.
And it seems as though that they had a fire and he lost a lot of that. A lot of papers lost that. So they built a new one made of stone so it wouldn't burn down.
Correct.
And in there, if I remember correctly, is the desk that John Quincy sat in when he was in the Congress. Correct. Or was it?
Right. Yep.
And it was also the desk that he argued from the Amistad case from in there as well.
I'm not sure about that.
know.
I know it is his congressional desk. So after his presidential career, John Quincy Adams went back to Congress. It served for a number of years, and so this was the desk that, when he had a heart attack and which ultimately killed him, that was the desk that he was standing at. And so that is on display in the Stone Library.
What was the relationship like between the second president and his son?
Ooh.
Was John Quincy in line 4?
6.
6.
Yeah. I think as far as we can tell, it was fine.
Yeah.
I think it was actually, quite good. I mean, John Quincy was the non-disappointment, basically. Charles had really kind of had some very bad times, and Thomas could never quite get it together. So I think that worked for John. And I think,
well, he probably spent the most time with his parents, didn't he? Out of all of them,
certainly with his father,
because he went with him to.
He went with exactly
to negotiate.
And I think I'm not sure quite what John Quincy thought about it entirely. I think we could get into the mysteries of John Quincy Adams, but that's kind of out of our range. But John Quincy was always going to do his father's papers and do his father's biography, and he never got himself to do it. And might have been because there was always he was obviously doing a lot of stuff about very important, pressing matters for most of his life. But there's always been speculation about how he had to feel about having to measure up to
such an amazing shadow. I mean,
exactly, the guy who invented the country. I mean, so it's good, but I think it's probably complicated in ways that you're not going to find any real documentary evidence for.
Yeah, I mean, the tragedy in the family was amazing, right?
Yeah.
You had their daughter died of breast cancer. She was fairly young.
She was relatively young, yeah, but there's basically no treatment at the time.
Right? Did she have children?
She did.
Yes.
She did. She was married to somebody who was, I think they had a complicated relationship too, didn't they?
He never really succeeded in business, so she was always reliant on her parents for support.
And then Charles was the next in line, alcoholic.
Yes.
Was he a drug or some sort of substance abuse issue, right?
A lot of issues, and
ended up dying from that.
Died quite young. He died while Adams was still in the White House. In
Wow.
fact, that 1 year they had in the White House, right at the end, just as everything else was going wrong, that happened. So that was difficult, and I think John's reaction to that is very complicated, between the grief and a kind of I'm writing him off kind of
disappointment and grief at the same time.
Yeah,
sure.
Right.
And Thomas is the youngest, and he just never failure to launch type of situation.
Kind of, yeah. You have letters even very early of both parents kind of like encouraging him to apply himself more, and he just never really finds his feet.
It's funny. I would imagine. I mean, I can't even imagine what it must be like to try to live live in the shadow of that legacy. So many people. I mean, you can never be your own person.
No,
right?
it would have absolutely have been daunting. Very, very daunting.
What is that life like after the White House? The White House was not. It's funny because I think it was President Clinton who say this is the crown jewel of the federal penal system, right? Because it's like the Oval Office was like a prison for him. Right. He said. So in this case, he obviously was the not alien sedition. It was Alien Sedition Act was his. That's right. Yeah, not very popular, right? We get these Bill of Rights says you get free speech, and then as soon as you gets a little hairy, we decide no free speech.
Right.
We're gonna nail that. We're gonna clamp down on that free speech. What's his life like after? Does he come home to like people warm welcome? Is he like, oh, that guy?
Oh, I think Quincy always welcomed him. I mean, he was always the first citizen of Quincy and the great man for the entire 25 years that he lived there, where he really just kind of plunks himself down there. Now, obviously, he makes small voyages out, but he doesn't really. A man who's traveled the world basically stays home for that last 25 years, and everybody respected him. He was universally admired in Quincy itself.
Do they try to bring him back in? They try to help him. Come help us with governing this. Run for that. Come take this position.
People were so sick of him at that point.
Oh, really?
Honestly,
we should tell everybody he's not a very likable guy, right? He's admired, but he was irascible.
During his career, he is, of course, in 1776, he's well known for being, arrogant and unliked, bossy. It's just he's so principled and so driven that it's hard for him he's not going to play nice just for the sake of playing nice. He's He's got work to do. He sees things a certain way, and he's not going to sway.
Which for
from that.
politicians is a really bad idea, right? It's very bad.
Right.
You need to be that. You need to schmooze people.
Right.
He's not a schmoozer.
And he's
They
not
were-
a smoozer.
And neither of them were.
No.
But also, John Quincy's career is beginning to take off around the time that John loses the presidency. So I think he also is willing to pass the torch on to the next generation, and he plays a kind of avuncular role after that, and obviously advises his son, but is not going to try and seek to get back into the fray himself.
Remind people now, how is the president chosen at this time? It's not a popular election. It's through the Electoral College, but the electoral delegates, were they chosen by the state legislatures? I'm trying to remember the exact. I used to know this. One of those things you used to know, and then you get you get the 10 gigabytes of memory, and you have to remember 11 gigabytes.
Right.
Some of them it's got to go.
So,
yeah.
I mean,
If I remember correctly, state legislatures pick the electors,
right,
and then
but
they go.
How the electors get picked for the legislature, I think, is kind of left to the state. So I think you have some that are more
You have a mix.
more popular election than others. But yes, it's the electors. Nobody's keeping track of the popular vote other than at the local level as to getting the electors. Through 1804, as we recently just double checked ourselves, you still have the guy with the most votes gets to be president. The guy with the second most votes gets to be vice president. So all the way through John's presidency and is lost to Jefferson. That's the operating.
And that's like an adversarial relationship, right? I mean, you have two people running against each other. One loses. Now you get to be vice president. So there's no ticket.
Right.
Where we're a team.
They realized pretty quickly that was not going to be a system that was going to work.
So you need to make it a team.
Yeah.
Because at that point, other than that, forget it. It's just to get people at each other's throats. And
which is how Elbridge Gerry became vice president of the United States, in fact.
Tell the story.
Well, he was the first one to be elected as a as a running mate rather than as the second.
Who did he run with?
Madison.
Madison. Oh, okay.
Madison's
Interesting.
second term. Yeah.
And so he was president at the terms that time.
4 years.
4 years. There's always 4 years. Okay. So they have those. So in this case, you have a wealth of amazing individuals coming out of Massachusetts.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the sheer genius of. I often say too, when it comes to like Nathaniel Greene, who was second in command to George Washington, from Rhode Island, Kentish Guards, grew up in Warwick, and then like a typical Rhode Islander went down and retired in the South, and died down there in Savannah, and now they have all the monuments down there, and he's just typical Rhode Islander. I'm going to retire. I'm going to go down there, get my pension. Died of heat stroke, by the way. You got to be careful, right?
Gosh, yeah, I know.
You didn't drink enough water. You got to make sure it's working in the fields, if I remember correctly. So, it's amazing to me that the wealth of experience, the philosophical depth, depth, excuse me, can't talk. The education of these men then, a lot of it self-taught, home educated, a tutor maybe, or a father saying, hey, John Adams, his dad was a pastor.
He was a deacon.
Deacon.
And
that at that time, that's a religious position. I mean, right? So do you have to be educated for that, or is it something you work into?
Well, you're promoted by your peers. It's not the same thing as being a minister or a teacher, which were the other two kind of classifications they had. So you wouldn't necessarily have to be a college graduate, although John's father was obviously very ambitious and was bound and determined that John was going to be a college graduate, whether he wanted to or not. And so you had to have standing within your community to get that position, which he did. I mean, he served in a number of town kind of committees and things like that. John remembers, there's a famous sort of religious controversy over a minister who was considered to be unorthodox, and Colonel John was the arbiter, and then meetings were being held in the Adams birthplace kind of house, and it was what convinced John that he was never going to go and be a minister. He was going to find something else to do.
So he became a lawyer.
Yeah, exactly.
Even more beloved. All right, we take a break here. We'll wrap up with our friends from the Quincy Historical Society when we come back. Then I see Little Miss 4th of July are here. We got to get that in because we've got to pay attention to the very important things. The Bristol side of the celebration coming up next. Stay right there. All right, I want to thank my very special guests. Every year you guys come down and agree to do this. Alexandra and Ed, thank you so much for once again. People want to go up to Quincy Historical Society and see what you guys are doing, what you're up to, events you're having. Mm-hmm. What do they do?
So best way to find us is to go to our website. So we are quincyhistory.org. We post about every single event that we have. We have a blog up there too, so you can check out some articles, videos, because we do recordings of some of our programs as well. We're on Facebook and Instagram. That's how you can get kind of direct communications about stuff. You can become a member as well if you would like
Very
to.
cool.
And
if they want to hear this talk that you connecting, is it online?
that
or
one is
can
online.
they
Yes.
invite you? Will you come to an organization that wants to hear
I
the
can
talk?
potentially, yes. So
All
if
right,
you
I'm just
have a
saying.
particular topic in Quincy history that you would like me to come in and do a talk about, I can do that.
All right, that's great. All right. So again, one more time, website.
So the website is quincyhistory.org. You can also always email us at info@quincyhistory.org. That is the best way to get in touch with us,
All right.
or to call us at 781-773 617-773-1144.
See, in Rhode Island, we only have one area code. So
We've got way too
401
many.
is easy. Yeah, there's many. All right, guys, thank you so much. I
Thank you
appreciate
so
it.
much.
All right.